Hello, my kiddos. Okay, Mom asked me to make these a little shorter to help you guys pay attention more during the readings. So I'm going to do that starting tonight. But also, the last couple chapters were just a lot of talking and not a lot of action. So I'm sure that made it more difficult as well. Fortunately, that's going to change. Okay, so here we go. They started on the road to Mount Doom. I mean, they have a long, long way to go before they get there. But we're going to, well, let's just keep going. That morning, they lit a fire in a deep hollow, shrouded by great bushes of holly, and their supper breakfast was merrier than it had been since they set out. They did not hurry to bed afterwards, for they expected to have all the night to sleep in, and they did not mean to go on again until the evening of the next day. Only Aragorn was silent and restless. After a while, he left the company and wandered on to the ridge. There he stood in the shadow of a tree, looking out southwards and westwards, with his head posed as if he was listening. Then he turned to the brink of the dell and looked down at the others laughing and talking. "What is the matter, Strider?" Merry called up. "What are you looking for? Do you miss the east wind?" "No, indeed," he answered, "but I miss something. I have been in the country of Holland in many seasons. No folk dwell here now, but many other creatures live here at all times, especially birds. Yet now all things but you are silent. I can feel it. There is no sound for miles about us, and your voices seem to make the ground echo. I do not understand it." Gandalf looked up with sudden interest. "But what do you guess is the reason?" he asked. "Is there more in it than surprise at seeing 4 hobbits, not to mention the rest of us, where people are so seldom seen or heard?" "I hope that is it," answered Aragorn, "but I have a sense of watchfulness and of fear that I have never had before. But I have a sense of watchfulness and of fear that I have never had here before." "Then we must be more careful," said Gandalf. "If you bring a ranger with you, it is well to pay attention to him, especially if the ranger is Aragorn. We must stop talking aloud, rest quietly, and set the watch." So he's worried because there should be a lot of noise from animals, but the animals aren't making any noise, which animals usually become quiet when they are afraid of something. It was Sam's turn that day to take the first watch, but Aragorn joined him. The others fell asleep. Then the silence grew until even Sam felt it. The breathing of the sleepers could be plainly heard. The swish of the pony's tail and the occasional movements of his feet became loud noises. Sam could hear his own joints creaking if he stirred. Dead silence was around him, and over all hung a clear blue sky as the sun rose up from the east. Away in the south, a dark patch appeared, and grew, and drove north like a flying smoke in the wind. "What's that, Strider?" "It don't look like a cloud," said Sam in a whisper to Aragorn. He made no answer. He was gazing intently at the sky, but before long Sam could see for himself what was approaching. Flocks of birds, flying at great speed, were wheeling and circling and traversing all the land as if they were searching for something, and they were steadily drawing nearer. "Lie flat and still," hissed Aragorn, pulling Sam down into the shade of a holly bush, for a whole regiment of birds had broken away suddenly from the main host and came flying low, straight towards the ridge. Sam thought they were a kind of crow or of large size. As they passed overhead, in so dense a throng that their shadow followed them darkly over the ground below, one harsh croak was heard. Not until they had dwindled into the distance north and west, and the sky was again clear would Aragorn rise. Then he sprang up and went and waked Gandalf. Regiments of black crows are flying over all the land between the mountains and the Greyflood, he said, and they have passed over Hollin. They are not natives here. They're Crebain out of Fangorn and Dunland. I do not know what they are about. Possibly there is some trouble away south from which they were fleeing, but I think they are spying out the land. I have also glimpsed many hawks flying high up in the sky. I think we ought to move again this evening. Hollin is no longer wholesome for us. It is being watched. And in that case, so is the Redhorn Gate, said Gandalf. And how we can get over that without being seen, I cannot imagine. But we will think of that when we must. As for moving as soon as it is dark, I am afraid that you are right. Luckily our fire made little smoke and had burned it low before the Crebain came, said Aragorn. It must be put out and not lit again. So remember, the Elf Lord, can't remember his name all of a sudden, told them that Sauron had animal spies that could find them, especially birds. So that's what those are. Well, if it isn't a plague and a nuisance, said Pippin. The news, no fire, and a move again by night had been broken to him as soon as he woke in the afternoon. All because of a pack of crows. I had looked forward to a real good meal tonight, something hot. Well, you can go on looking forward, said Gandalf. There may be many unexpected feasts ahead of you. For myself, I should like a pipe to smoke in comfort and warmer feet. However, we are certain of one thing at any rate. It will get warmer as we get south. Too warm, I shouldn't wonder, muttered Sam to Frodo, but I'm beginning to think it's time we got a sight of that fiery mountain and saw the end of the road, so to speak. I thought at first that this here Redhorn, or whatever its name is, might be it, till Gimli spoke his piece. A fair jawcracker, dwarf language must be. Maps conveyed nothing to Sam's mind, and all distances in these strange lands seemed so vast that he was quite out of his reckoning. All that day the company remained in hiding. The dark birds passed over now and again, but as the westering sun grew red, they disappeared southward. At dusk the company set out, and turning now half east, they steered their course towards Caradhras, which far away still glowed faintly red in the last light of the vanished sun. One by one, white stars sprang forth as the sky faded. Guided by Aragorn, they struck a good path. It looked to Frodo like the remains of an ancient road that had once been broad and well planned, from Hollin to the mountain pass. The moon, now at the full, rose over the mountains and cast a pale light in which the shadows of stones were black. Many of them looked to have been worked by hands, though now they lay tumbled and ruinous in a bleak, barren land. It was the cold, chill hour before the first stir of dawn, and the moon was low. Frodo looked up at the sky. Suddenly he saw or felt a shadow pass over the high stars, as if for a moment they faded and then flashed out again. He shivered. "Did you see anything pass over?" he whispered to Gandalf, who was just ahead. "No, but I felt it, whatever it was," he answered. "It may be nothing, only a wisp of thin cloud." "It was moving fast then," muttered Aragorn, "and not with the wind." Nothing further happened that night. The next morning dawned even brighter than before. But the air was chill again. Already the wind was turning back towards the east. For 2 more nights they marched on, climbing steadily but ever more slowly as their road wound up into the hills, and the mountains towered up nearer and nearer. On the 3rd morning, Caradhras rose before them, a mighty peak, tipped with snow like silver. but with sheer naked sides, dull red as if stained with blood. There was a black look in the sky, and the sun was wan. The wind had gone now round to the northeast. Gandalf snuffed the air and looked back. "Winter deepens behind us," he said quietly to Aragorn. "The heights away north are whiter than they were. Snow is lying far down their shoulders. Tonight we shall be on our way high up towards the Redhorn Gate. We may well be seen by watchers on that narrow path, and waylaid by some evil, but the weather may prove a more deadly enemy than any. What do you think of your course now, Aragorn?" When he says waylaid, he means ambushed. Frodo overheard these words and understood that Gandalf and Aragorn were continuing some debate that had begun long before. He listened anxiously. "I think no good of our course from beginning to end, as you know well, Gandalf," answered Aragorn, "and perils known and unknown will grow as we go on. But we must go on, and it is no good our delaying the passage of the mountains. Further south there are no passes. Still one comes to the Gap of Rohan. I do not trust that way since the news of Saruman. Who knows which side now the marshals of the Horse Lords serve?" "Who knows indeed," said Gandalf, "but there is another way, and not by the pass of Caradhras, the dark and secret way that we have spoken of. But let us not speak of it again, not yet. Say nothing to the others, I beg, not until it is plain that there is no other way." "We must decide before we go further," answered Gandalf. "Then let us weigh the matter in our minds while the others rest and sleep," said Aragorn. All right, so that other path that they're talking about is going through Moria, which is the mountain where the dwarves built a huge hall underground and stuff, and they're afraid to go there. In the late afternoon, while the others were finishing their breakfast, Gandalf and Aragorn went aside together and stood looking at Caradhras. Its sides were now dark and sullen, and its head was in grey cloud. Frodo watched them, wondering which way the debate would go. When they returned to the company, Gandalf spoke, and then he knew that it had been decided to face the weather and the high pass. He was relieved. He could not guess what was the other dark and secret way, but the very mention of it had seemed to fill Aragorn with dismay, and Frodo was glad that it had been abandoned. "From signs that we have seen lately," said Gandalf, "I fear that the Redhorn Gate may be watched, and also I have doubts of the weather that is coming up behind. Snow may come. We must go with all the speed that we can. Even so, it will take us more than 2 marches before we reach the top of the pass. Dark will come early this evening. We must leave as soon as you can get ready." "I will add a word of advice, if I may," said Boromir. "I was born under the shadow of the White Mountains, and know something of journeys in the high places. We shall meet bitter cold, if no worse, before we come down on the other side. It will not help us to keep so secret that we are frozen to death. When we leave here, where there are still a few trees and bushes, each of us should carry a faggot of wood as large as he can bear," which means a bundle of sticks. "And Bill could take a bit more, couldn't you, lad?" said Sam. The pony looked at him mournfully. "Very well," said Gandalf, "but we must not use the wood, not unless it is a choice between fire and death." The company set out again, with good speed at first, but soon their way became steep and difficult. The twisting and climbing road had in many places almost disappeared, and was blocked with many fallen stones. The night grew deadly dark under great clouds. A bitter wind swirled among the rocks. By midnight they had climbed to the knees of the great mountains. The narrow path now wound under a sheer wall of cliffs to the left, above which the grim flanks of Caradhras towered up invisible in the gloom. On the right was a gulf of darkness where the land fell suddenly into a deep ravine. Laboriously they climbed a sharp slope and halted for a moment at the top. Frodo felt a soft touch on his face. He put out his arm and saw the dim white flakes of snow settling on his sleeve. They went on. But before long the snow was falling fast, filling all the air and swirling into Frodo's eyes. The dark bent shapes of Gandalf and Aragorn only a pace or two ahead could be hardly seen. "I don't like this at all," panted Sam just behind. "Snow's all right on a fine morning, but I like to be in bed while it's falling. I wish this lot would go off to Hobbiton. Folk might welcome it there." Except on the high moors of the Northfarthing, a heavy fall was rare in the Shire, and was regarded as a pleasant event, and a chance for fun. No living hobbit, save Bilbo, could remember the fell winter of 1311 when white wolves invaded the Shire over the frozen Brandywine. Gandalf halted. Snow was thick on his hood and shoulders. It was already ankle-deep about his boots. "This is what I feared," he said. "What do you say now, Aragorn?" "That I feared it too," Aragorn answered, "but less than other things. I knew the risk of snow, though it seldom falls heavily so far south, save high up in the mountains. But we are not high yet. We are still far down, where the paths are usually open all the winter. I wonder if it is a contrivance of the enemy," said Boromir. "They say in my land that he can govern the storms in the mountains of shadow that stand upon the borders of Mordor. He has strange powers and many allies." "His arm has grown long indeed," said Gimli, "if he can draw snow down from the north to trouble us here 300 leagues away." "His arm has grown long," said Gandalf. All right, we're going to stop there, kiddos. So they're stuck on a mountain pass. The snow is falling, and they're trying to decide whether to abandon that route and go through Moria. So we'll pick that up tomorrow. I love you always and forever, no matter what.